Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of Imperial as One's Belonging series, where we explore the different experiences of people from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. And this week, I am really happy to have with us Luis Balseca. Luis, I've known for a while, and he is multifaceted. Let's put it that way. But I'm gonna let Luis tell his story. He works as a global learning services technologist, and his work is fantastic. That's all I can say. But Luis, we're gonna go on today to just ask you a little bit about your sense of belonging, your sense of identity, where that comes from. So I always start off by asking, where did you get your sense of belonging as you were growing up, either within the family or wherever it is? Where did that sense of belonging come from?
Right. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. My sense of belonging, I would have to say, it comes really deep within my family, my direct family, my parents, my brother, my sister.
Mm-hmm.
But as growing up, I would have to say it's also within kind of the UK, and obviously how varied my environment was. Obviously, with my friends, my peers growing up, we're studying together, making a couple of friends throughout that period, and also from the cultural background of, from being Latin American. Um, Obviously, when I arrived to the UK with Dini speaking English, it was pretty much down to my parents and my brother, my sister, kind of trying to build that kind of knowledge around what was happening in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
how to get along, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big cultural change, and
Mm-hmm.
that made things, I wouldn't say difficult, it was just challenging in the sense that you need to go through that kind of step, kind of difficulty for you to grow. I didn't
Yeah.
get it at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously looking back to it, it made me the person I am today.
Yeah. So let's just explore that a little bit more, if you don't mind, which with regards to that transition from Ecuador
Mhm.
to the UK. How old were you, and were you? And you said you didn't speak much English. How did that impact on you as a little boy?
All right. So when I arrived to the UK, I was 12, 13 years old. So
Right.
entering that teenager stage in my life.
Yeah.
My dad and my brother, they were here 6 months beforehand. So when I arrived here with my mom and my older sister, um, we basically kind of already had a bit of knowledge. But bear in mind that in South America, we always learn English, but Americanized English.
Right. Okay.
So
Okay. Yeah.
obviously, some of the things that you might say, or some of the words that you might write in different ways, obviously
Mhm.
it comes as a difficulty altogether. So basically, we had to start from scratch.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so language barrier was I think one of the most predominant kind of issues that we had at that stage, because
Hmm.
as a kid you tend to learn quite quick, but not as quick that other kids, being within that environment, won't
Yeah.
take a nick, like not bully you per se, but make things a little bit difficult for another kid.
Yeah.
And that was quite difficult at that point. Regardless
Mhm.
of that, we did manage to go through the first couple, I would say, first 6 months without not knowing anything, to at least knowing and defend ourselves and with a few words and pieces. And straight away, we went into I went to secondary school, my sister as well. So from year seven, end of year seven, beginning of year eight, carried
Yeah.
on through secondary, college, and university.
Yeah.
Uh, I would say the first 2 years were the most difficult of my life. Looking back, were also the best years of my life, because I got to meet people that even nowadays I can still go back and say thank you. It
Hmm.
was great, and I still keep them as friends.
Oh, fantastic! I'm going to explore that a little bit more then, because for it to be the most challenging, but coming out to be kind of like the most rewarding, we need to unpack that a little bit more. All right. So coming over as a teenager, anyhow, there's all the challenges of just yourself changing, as it were,
Mm.
then having the cultural. How big a cultural shock was it for you when you came across, compared to what you had experienced in Ecuador and etc., and coming across here? How was that?
It was a major impact. Okay, so the difference between being a teenager or like an early teens age in South America is a bit more freedom in the sense that you might travel for about, I would say, 30 minutes, 40 minutes from your house to your secondary school,
Hmm.
public bus.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. Also the fact that when you go there, there are, I mean, the school system, it's okay, but it wasn't premium.
Okay.
And also that you basically end up talking to everyone. And I mean, from people in the streets to people who might not do the greatest things in the world, for example, probably that robbery, stuff like that. But obviously, you won't really kind of judge them among that side. Whereas when you come here, again, let me just say that I'm not portraying Ecuador as in the worst place ever, but it has that kind of background.
Yeah.
But when you come to the UK and then all of a sudden you have, okay, so this is cool. You're not going to pay for any of this because obviously your dad is paying for tax.
Hmm.
You're going to be in this school. Bear in mind that also there was school I went to. It was a community school.
Right.
It still is. So it wasn't that big jump to,
Yeah.
something quite straightforward. But it still gave me that sense of, oh, there is quite good teachers here. There's a lot of technology that we didn't have over there.
Hmm.
The freedom that, well, I would say freedom, the traveling that we had to make to go to school, it wasn't as far anyway. So
Yeah.
we had to literally walk from my house to school in about 10 minutes.
Right.
That was quite new. And also that at that point, my mom would actually in South America, she would take me to school at least the first couple of weeks. Whereas here, she took me the first, she came with me on the first day, but it wasn't really expected.
Yeah.
So again, it was more of a, okay, so you're independent, you deal with it. When it comes to grades, when it comes to study, my parents will come in and see if I've done immediate progress.
Yeah.
So both sides, they're quite different, but at the same time, challenging in their own right.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that was kind of like the approach. And as an early teen, I did mention right at the beginning, it was tough, obviously, with other kids. Sometimes they're not the greatest of supports that you can have. But again, you do make these few people who just give you that hand to,
Yeah.
to do your role.
So I'm alluding to the kind of like how children will respond to people who they perceive as different, right? There's a couple of ways I can imagine. Firstly, it's a new kid, so they test the boundaries. How did they test the boundaries with you when you were coming over here and starting in this new school? What boundaries would you say that they tested with you?
Oh, okay. So there were a few actually. And I would say, in all essence, it came from first of all, from the psychological side of it, thinking back. For example, the fact that as I came into the classroom, everyone, and I think this happens even to new kids moving from school to school, they try to size you. So, for example, they would say, "Okay, so that's a new kid. Let's see where he's going to sit, how he's going to speak, how he's going to behave." Personally speaking, I think even my mannerisms change a bit because I thought, "Oh, this is going to be a great time for me to change my character." Not a great idea. So that saying of parents from even from me as a parent, always be yourself. You're not really yourself because you're still growing. You don't know what you're going to become in the next 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
So I try to envision myself as a quiet kid trying to do my work, try to do well in the school,
Hmm.
and then have friends.
Hmm.
As I came in, try to do that wasn't ideal because kids will basically challenge everything that you say because your accent is different, or
Hmm.
that you won't pronounce things in the right way.
Hmm.
They will challenge you or because you're smaller or probably thinner or something along those lines, obviously physically and compared to other people. But
Hmm.
then when you show some kind of I don't know, improvement on yourself, either be it from sports, from writing, from speaking, they'll challenge that as well because then you find the people that want to challenge you to make you like get you better to the better stage or the next level up.
Hmm.
So for example, I got this one scene in my head that keeps on coming up. um it was one of my best friends, but at the same time my nemesis. Who would always come sit right next to me. He would try to explain things to me. I wouldn't understand it to the point where I can say, oh yes, thank you, or I would just say yes and then kind of give him a thumbs up. But then every time I would just make one step forward, he would make fun of me to say, "Oh, that's not the way you say it. This is the way you say it." So you see what I mean? It was tough love, I would say.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
and that, hence why I think it was tough. It was great, and if tough, it was great at the same time. So throughout the time, for the, I think, as I said, for the first 2 years, it was pretty much down to, can I pick up the language? Can I pick up the accent? Can I pick up my friendship? And then as I was going through that kind of period, I also saw new kids coming into the classroom, obviously with not in a similar stage, because like they knew English, they were born and bred in the UK, and while they were going through the same process, they had a different approach. So the things that didn't work for me worked for them. So it brought me back thinking years after that, that every kid and every person is different. Hence, even if you put them in the same place, in the same situation, with probably similar level also knowledge and the skills, that won't necessarily be exactly the same effect.
Yeah, yeah.
So they were more friendlier. I was an introvert. They were an extrovert. We both kind of thrive in different areas and aspects of our lives. And yes, after we saw each other, and we thought, well, we came across as different people. We're similar. We
Mhm.
just had a different approach and different insight on what was happening around us.
Yeah. Did you understand that at the time though? Because that's quite a reflective, a reflection at the time when you were going through it. Was it, why are they challenging me, or how was it helping to develop your character?
Well, I have to say, and again, at that point in time, I didn't understand it. I was very kind of into what I was doing. Actually into the mind of what was wrong with me rather than what was wrong with the system or what was wrong with everyone else.
Hmm.
So, and I think because it was very independent and it was my thoughts alone, I kept on thinking, okay, so if I'm here, no, I don't have that many people that understand me or understand, what I'm going through. Then I'm just going to go and kind of build on myself in a way that I understand myself.
Hmm.
So through, I would say, for the first 3 months, no, actually no, for those 2 years, I was in detention every single day.
Oh my goodness.
But
Go on.
not because, but okay, so this is the thing. It's not because I wasn't doing my work. It wasn't because I was fighting or anything at all. It was because I would say, I was making myself late every day. So I could actually stay a bit later and then have a proper chat with the people that would stay later in the late kind of a stage of the school, because they would have more patience to what I was trying to do.
Ah, that's an interesting strategy.
But you see what I mean? That was my strategy, and it worked for me in the sense that, as an introverted person at that time, it was good enough for me to learn how to speak properly, or at least
Mhm.
speak in general,
Yeah.
how to write and how to maneuver myself about around different circles.
Hmm.
Why? Because the people that were in detention at the end of the day, they had different backgrounds. They had issues with the parents. They had issues with the school. They had issues with authority in general. But I was just there because I wanted to have friends that they thought they didn't belong,
Yeah.
and then that made myself belong in an area that, although I wasn't great at anything, or at that point I thought I was helping out people to actually come out from the shelves to do other stuff. So one of my friends, actually, he was attention quite often because of fighting in general. Like, he would say, no one understand me. He was really angry at everything and everyone.
Hmm.
So we ended up just being quite good friends. We went off, and one day we were just playing around in the school park, and a couple of guys came over. They tried to fight because we wouldn't get off the monkey bars. And all of a sudden, I thought he was going to start the fight, or he was going to carry on fighting. He just pulled me over and he just said, like, let's go. And and I don't know if it was me kind of actioning on what was happening, or the fact that he just didn't want to fight anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then years later, I would say around college time, when I went to college, I saw him again, and he actually had a nice family. I mean, he was quite young. He was, I would say, college about 17, 16. and he already had a family. He had a kid, and he was with his girlfriend.
Mhm.
And then when I spoke to him, he said, "No, no, I'm fine. I'm actually working, part time. I'm living with my girlfriend, and I thought I was gonna have I was gonna have no future." But he was happy at the time. Then years later, after that, I think it was when I was 25, 26, he already had two more kids, and he was actually running his own building, so building kind of a little kind of self-employed thing.
Yeah.
So as you can see, having him in a different stage of life,
Mhm.
having me grow up with a person who I thought, or he thought that he wasn't gonna have any future,
Mhm.
kind of puts us into perspective that regardless of what your background is, or regardless of how you perceive yourself, if you're happy to talk to the one person and just make that little change,
Mhm.
it can help them. Not like a miles, not miles ahead, but it does help them. So I think through that kind of momentum, I just said to myself, I just have to talk to people. I have to. I'm not an extrovert person, but I have to, and that helps me help them, and they help me grow as well.
That's a brilliant story. Absolutely brilliant. Um, one of the reasons why was because although within the school system, I suppose,
Mm.
sometimes people can be left behind.
Yeah.
They're made to feel as though they don't belong. So the fact that he was kind of like being put in detention for fighting because he didn't feel that he fitted in. But
Mm.
your act of kind of like, let's go talk, which was kind of like therapeutic for you as well, if I'm right in saying that, it kind of like helped you to overcome your shyness, as it were, yeah, your introvertedness. It actually helped the two of you
Mhm.
because it gave him a different perspective. You gave him a sense of belonging of who he could be,
But bear in
kind
mind,
of.
yeah, exactly. But bear in mind that at that point, I didn't know that was happening. I
Yeah,
only came to that realization years after.
yeah.
Even now, speaking about it, it puts so many things into perspective of, oh, I could have done something better, but I didn't have to,
Mm-hmm,
because the person that was then kind of did whatever he had to do. The person
mm-hmm,
that was years after also spoke to him, and then he did what he had to do. The person that I am now will also go through a period of setbacks, a period of friendships, a period of I don't know, evolution, and then this person will be different to the one in about 2 3 years.
yeah, yeah,
So all of a sudden, you think, yes, my culture might have a big impact on obviously how I react at that point in time, but then also my surroundings help me kind of have that sense of belonging
yeah,
without even knowing.
yeah.
Now, I would say the only thing that really kind of helped me out, kind of having the endurance, was the background that my dad kind of set myself in.
Mm-hmm,
Uh, Okay, so a bit of context in that side. My granddad, he was a really old, how can I put it? He was a hardcore dad, an old school dad. So to my dad, he would say, okay, you have to wake up, have a cool shower, go to school, come back, come with me to work, because they were used to build tiles, like
mm-hmm,
the other way. And then you have to go back to home and then help out your mom and then help with the other brothers and sisters. So my dad having that kind of background, then as we were growing up, he didn't kind of give us everything in a plate. He always said to us, "There's always going to be a hard moment. There's always going to be hard things to do, but you just do them."
mm-hmm,
And then he wasn't kind of coloring everything pink or
mm-hmm,
everything is blue. This is the way you do it.
mm-hmm,
No, he just said like things will go wrong. Just,
mm-hmm,
be upfront about them.
mm-hmm.
So that having that kind of background, that kind of I think helped me out without knowing, helped me out through my life.
So it was a kind of like a pragmatic. These things will happen. You've got to kind of like deal with them. Don't kind of like sit back and think I can't do anything because this has happened to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Life events happen, and so you're going to have to deal with whatever it is that has happened to you. Is that kind of like what his mentality was?
And it
Yeah,
still is.
and still is.
It still is like I don't think he's changed a bit. If anything, he's been becoming a little bit more flexible in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
but he still has that kind of approach. Now, although it might sound like a really mature Louis back then, he wasn't. And I said like he, because like I see him as a kid that was shy, was nervous, he was scared, he was very he was very meticulous about what he did because he didn't want to do wrong. He wanted to do good, and
Right.
for you to kind of be okay with everyone else,
Yeah.
be accepted by everyone else.
Yeah.
Um, but I think every single time something went wrong, um, it just challenged his mind, and then it kind of made him change to what obviously what would become of him today.
So tell me how excuse me, how did some of those early experiences um, propel you to where you are now and the kind of interests which you have and the development of the programs which you do? How did that little shy boy coming over from Ecuador, helping out, staying in detention to get a bit more conversation, how did that lead to where we are now, Louis?
Right. So this is actually interesting because I have a discussion with one of my ex-colleagues about 2 years ago, and he had a similar theme in the sense that it was more of a okay. So where do you come from? I said I come from South America, but I grew up in the UK. Then I thought, or actually at that point, my colleague said, "Oh, so you grew up in the UK?" I was like, "Yes, I did, but I still feel that I'm from South America mainly because my friends most are from South America and so on." Right. So how do you like how do you manage to grow from that, out of that? And that was an interesting question because I thought I haven't grown out of it. I mean, I still feel very South American, although I lived in the UK for most of my life. But then I explained to her that look, it's not that I have grown out of it, it's the fact that I actually learn how to live and actually evolve from that point. For example, throughout my career, there's always been that mentality or that kind of thought behind my head that either I might not say the right thing
Mm-hmm.
because I can't really explain myself as well as I could in Spanish, even though in Spanish it would be worse. You see what I mean? There's that confusion
Yeah.
in the back of my head. And also because I reckon that people that lived or actually grown up or they have the that kind of the English that I think I couldn't have evolved in a different way, or they probably sound a bit more professional. And then always like kind of stop me from building up on what I thought I could do. So when I said to do okay, so from the point when she asked me that question, I said, look, I've gone through so much, not going to the right school, going to community school, learning from the basics, but then having experiences with people from different backgrounds has shown me that I can do that and much more
Mm-hmm.
as long as I have the willingness to learn how to deal with people.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the skill itself, but just
Mm-hmm.
dealing with people and talking to the person, making sure that they get that I understand where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that at that point, she understood that I wasn't trying to say that I'm learning how to read people. I'm learning how to live with other people, make sure they understand me and I understand them.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't get to that point, I don't think if you move from career to career, you won't be able, or even from job to role to job role, you won't really get that resilience. Because, say, for example, going from a university where everyone's very academic, everyone's doing really well, the IQ is quite high, but then you come as a young guy coming from university, done something creative, and trying to have that kind of high level conversation wouldn't come across as something intelligent. And
Mm-hmm.
believe me, I felt like that many times over.
Yeah.
Once you go past that threshold of having 2 to 3 conversations where you thought maybe that didn't went well, to the point where he says, "Oh, I understand that conversation. I understand the context of the conversation. I can actually move forward into something more in depth, not because I know the knowledge, but because I know the person."
Mm-hmm.
Then that makes that kind of experience valid.
I like that idea. I like that idea, Louis, in that you place more value in the person than in necessarily the knowledge that you have or somebody else has. So it's the individual that becomes important, not necessarily the circumstances which have got you into that place. Is that, am I along the right lines?
That is correct. That is
So
correct.
you want to place more value on the individual and understanding what makes that individual work and how you can connect with them, then you do want to spend with, oh, just showing, oh yes, well, I know all of this information and whatever else. Because that's anyone can get that information, but not everybody can get that understanding of the person.
Yeah, and along the same lines, I wouldn't share my struggles to show that I've gone through much more than other people. Because, say, for example, everything that we have spoken until this point, those were my struggles, but they were the struggles that happened to me, but I wouldn't push them onto other people, because other people have their different struggles. It might be smaller, they might be bigger, but it's independent, it's individual to them, and that will make them become the person that they are today, or they will become tomorrow. So in that, having in the same conversation, to tell them, oh, I've gone through so much, respect me because I've gone through so much, I don't think it's fair as well on the other person, because it's not the place to think, oh, I need to go through a lot in order for me to understand you. I don't think that's fair on anyone.
That's interesting. That's very interesting, because sometimes people almost like wear their struggles as a badge of honor. I've done this, I've done that. And what you're saying here is actually the struggles made you who you are, but let's see who you are, if that makes sense, without necessarily focusing in on the intricacies of the struggle. We do recognize that the struggle was there and it has been important, and we're not diminishing that, but we want to see how we can work together beyond that position. Is that right?
No, that is exactly the point. Not just the point, but kind of the approach I've been having, for years now. Because I said, like, okay, so trying to like simplify this thing a little bit, well, actually going deeper into it. While I had friends that came from similar countries, similar age range, and similar kind of status, we all have different perspectives on how we struggled. And I wouldn't say, oh, I've done this, therefore I am better than you, or I've gone through a lot more, therefore I know better than you. So having those chats with them through my life and being quite close to them, I can say that regardless of what you've gone through, it's down to you to accept them as they are, so you can accept yourself as you are. Whereas from what I can say from my struggles is like, that was the way I was, but now I am always looking forward to how I can actually be a little bit better next day. And even if something goes wrong, or something goes really wrong in my life, either missing, or I don't know, like missing a parent or missing a kid or whatever the way, I might say this in a really cold way, but if something goes really bad in my life, I'm hoping, touch wood, that I can actually make my life a little bit better next day. Not because I don't care, but because I know that whatever happens now will always be with me next day.
Yeah, I understand that. So it's more of not necessarily saying living in the moment, but it is kind of living in the moment and accepting what's happened. The past, you can't change the past, but you can influence what happens to you now and what happens to you in the future.
Correct.
And so, not to say don't think back on what's happened in the past to help direct where you want to go, but don't live your life now as though you were living in the past. Yeah.
And I think that really correlates with how you perceive your sense of belonging. Because sense of belonging only means that you are comfortable in your environment. You feel comfortable with the people around you. That doesn't really necessarily mean that wherever you go, you're going to feel well. You're also going to find places or people that are not going to be good for you, or probably that you're not going to be liked. And I've heard this one thing that that you have the right not to be liked, and that's part of the where you belong.
Mhm.
Because not everyone's going to be happy and dandy and always welcoming, and that's
Mhm.
fine. That's okay.
Mhm.
It's hard to understand, but it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yours is your reflections are just absolutely brilliant, Louis. Um, in terms of, I can see you're a person who, no matter what challenge comes your way, you're not going to allow that challenge to define you to say, I can't do something because of that. Am I right to say that?
Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, in the sense that I will do my whatever is within my power to
Hmm.
overcome it or to be upfront about it.
Hmm.
But like every other human, we
Hmm.
do have moments where you feel down, you feel
Hmm.
against the wall, you feel that you can't really go beyond a certain point.
Hmm.
But then that's where
Hmm.
you start taking a step back. You take a moment for yourself to
Hmm.
recharge, to even to just be sad,
Hmm.
and then move forward. Now, although it sounds quite straightforward, it's not. It takes time, and it takes
Hmm.
practice, and it takes endurance, and it takes resilience for every single step that we all take.
Hmm.
Now, whatever works for me, I won't really say that it works for everyone.
Yeah.
But again, it's just literally the way that my brain works up to a certain point.
That it's, yeah. So it's like the saying that you said before. It's okay for people not to like you, right? Is part of our everyday existence, and it's okay for us to be able to say, okay, um, this situation wasn't great. I've learned from it. I learned lessons from the experience.
Yeah.
It wasn't a good experience necessarily, but I've learned the lessons which it can teach me.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Really is. I'm going to just ask. Um, Normally, I open up to the audience to see if anyone has any questions which they would like to ask. And I will in a second. But how did you get into, just in terms of the career that you're in, how did you get into that? What was it that excited you, gave you that passion for the work which you do now?
Right. To be completely honest, and again, I think this is for most of the people that I know of, by accident, a happy accident of that.
Okay. Go on.
Well, it is true. I think the one thing I would say, and the only thing that I had in my mind since I was little, is that I love to be creative. I
Mm-hmm.
love to, I would say learn, but more of the aspect of learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I love being able to help. I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's, yeah, be of servicial. So the three aspects that I had, I pushed them all the way through my learning path. Obviously, going through university, college and university, where I did arts, I did animation and graphic design, and then as I
Mm-hmm.
went on to a year of literally just a sabbatical before
Mm-hmm.
I went on to Catholic Music School, where actually I started there as a general no facilities people. So basically, the person who would set up the events, just
Yeah.
moving chairs and tables. That's all I
Yeah.
did. So I
Right.
did that for about 6 months. And as I spoke to my manager, I spoke to the IT people, again, just kind of creating those relationships. They just said, oh, actually, you know what? We have a vacancy. Would you like to work in IT? We're like, I
Mm-hmm.
know IT, I can do that.
Yeah.
Moving from that point, would you like to work in e-learning? And I thought, I didn't know that then. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Um, and then all of a sudden, they just said, well, you have to help the lecturers, help them out with the delivery.
Mm-hmm.
I can do that. I can learn. I can pick things up. I can do that. And as I stumbled into it, it was literally again that kind of conversations, and then have the kind of the shyness, and then trying to come out from the show. So just to talk to people and say, look, I don't know about this, but I can go out, find out, and then come back. And I think that worked, and I think it worked well for me at least.
Brilliant.
And then
Brilliant.
as I
Go
go
on.
into the Bible, then it was more of a okay. I picked this up, and I picked that other skill up, and I picked all these skills up. I'm going to put them into a little bubble. What can I do with them?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it came into kind of I can do projects, I can do creative stuff, and I can actually help people. I'm a learning technologist, and I
Yeah.
think if you tick those three boxes, you have the potential to do that because you have
Yeah.
to have the willingness to help people. And if you can't help them with your skills, either learn the skill or find who can.
Yeah. Yeah. I, you know what? I love your openness. love your openness in terms of not kind of like being pretentious to say I know everything, and some people carry on as though, yeah, we know everything. It's that kind of like humility to say, well, I don't know how to, I don't necessarily know, but I know that I could learn how to do it. So give me a little time and I will go away and I will find out, excuse me, how we can develop this even better, or to make this a thing which can work for all of us. So I think that's wonderful. I'm going to just open up to find out if there's anyone else who would like to ask a question. Otherwise, I've got a couple more which I wouldn't mind just exploring with you. Is there any other questions from the... I see someone coming on camera.
Hi all.
Hi, you're right.
Hi Lewis. I didn't actually know this was happening today, and I used to work with Lewis as a learning technologist myself in the Faculty of Medicine, and I'm just laughing and listening, and it's interesting the experience that you felt, because you're saying from a point of view where you weren't born here and you had different in terms of languages, but I, even as a person born here, experienced some of the same issues that you would have experienced as well. And you mentioned things like schooling. And I was having a really interesting conversation with my brother this morning about how as a child, your parents don't really know the right way to go. They just go to school. And that's all you're told as a child, especially a child of immigrants. And you assume and you have that trust that the teachers and the people there will always help you. And I do feel sometimes that you perhaps weren't put on the right path because you were never shown to look under the right rocks, as it were. So and I think that's the thing for all of us as people of color, people who've come to this country, people of children of immigrants themselves. You never ever sort of get told, look under this rock and you will find this treasure, or look under this rock and you'll find that treasure. You kind of just muddle through, and we all just muddle through life. And if you ask your parents, why did you do that? Oh, that I needed a job, so that's what I had to do. And then only later on you realize actually your parents or grandparents, they may have been scientists, or they may have been, I don't know, composers, or really grand careers that you never knew about, but they came to this country or a different country and went, I just ended up just being a bus driver because I needed a job, needed to pay bills, had kids. So it's really interesting to hear that it's a thing that we all go through. There were so many. I was laughing to myself because there's so many things that you said, and I think also resilience as well. I think for us, it's inbuilt in us, really.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. I think, like, if I had a bad day at school, Mum would always say, "Okay, pick yourself up, dust yourself off again, and off you go again." And I think when they talk about resilience, I think, well, it's one of those things that you don't want to see. Again, being sad and crying and that kind of thing, you do that in private. I mean, my father, for example, is very stoic, very private. And if he does cry, not that I've ever seen him cry, but if he does, it's very much, I'll cry by myself. No one sees me cry, even though he does.
I love, it's that, I suppose based on what you've said, it's that shared experience of people who are kind of like, I'm not going to say first generation or children of immigrants, children who either came here or were born here, where the system isn't fully explained to their parents, and the system isn't the same as what you would have encountered in your homeland, as it were. So because of that, you're almost like at a bit of a disadvantage, or potentially at a disadvantage in that, how do you navigate through the system when you're so unclear about what that system has to offer? Does that make sense?
Okay, so I have just another point of view in that sense, because now that I have my own kids, I thought, okay, so I grew up here from my teens and so on. I should be able to direct them, as Sharon said, like probably potentially in the right path, or more or less in the right path. I should be able to give them probably a better experience. I should show them a bit more what can I put it, a bit more, how can I put it, just a bit better quality of approach to what they're going to go through in life.
Mhm.
I don't think that's the case. Because I don't think any parent knows how to be a good parent. We try to be good parents and we try to do the best we can. As an adult, yes, you are becoming an adult because you know how to do mature things or choose the right things, or choose the right way to do things. But even then, we still have a kid in our minds that says, "You done something wrong in the back in the past. Try to do something better in the front, like in the future." So because that kid is telling us to do, the adult to do that, now we're trying to do that to with our kids without actually realizing that we're trying to mirror our experiences to their future, or to their,
Mm.
you see what I
Yeah,
mean? Now,
yeah.
I know that we muddled through because no one actually showed us the path. Also, probably we couldn't find the right path. But I think that's kind of the journey that it's, although it's very out there, it is a journey that each person have to go through. And I reckon my kids will have a completely different journey from what I had. They are
Mhm.
going to have completely different struggles, as I mentioned before, and it's good for them because as long as we are as parents here to show them or give them that extra push, they will be fine. That's what my parents did. I reckon that's what their parents did. And I think that is what helped us kind of move forward. And I reckon probably some of us who had our two parents or each as my single parents, if they were there just to support and say, look, dust yourself off and move on, we will be okay. And I reckon that's kind of the way we should actually kind of show them as well, because although the learning system it's set that is there to be for that, for how to put it, for success, is set for success, it's not really, because not we know our factory. We shouldn't be pushed onto the school and then be kind of shown and taught in the same way as 50 other students. It doesn't work that way.
You know what? I like that approach, right? Because I'm going to call it a principle over practicalities.
Mhm.
Yeah, because the practicalities of the situation may change, but if you've instilled the right principles into the children or into your children, then you hope that they too will get that kind of work ethic, that kind of resilience, that inner self-belief, that sense of belonging and identifying who they are. Yeah. So I'm gonna throw back as a little bit of a challenge, right? I know that you've got young. What happens when, and I'm not gonna say Sharon or anybody else, what happens when your children start to say, Mum and Dad, right? That was in your day, right? That's not our day, right? What are you gonna do then, my good friend?
It's hard to say, I would say. It's happened already. Well, I would say it happened already. It happens every day because, okay, put it this way. They're always going to have questions, right?
Mhm.
And there's always going to be challenges for them and they don't know how to react. We don't know how to react to that challenge because it just, it's just a variety of elements that are going to happen at the same time.
Yeah.
And all we can do is literally just to kind of step back. And now that I'm in my dad's shoes, I can say they didn't know better. You know what they did? They faked it. They faked it so well that they knew what they were doing. So we actually got the gist of it, just a tiny bit. So when my kids can say like, "Mom, Dad, can you help me?" We're like, "Yes, I can help you. I can show you how it works, and then you have to do it. And if it breaks, then you have to fix it. And if it doesn't get fixed, then find another way." See what I mean? There's no, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, like a straight away, but there is a way of you trying to make the most out of a situation. I reckon that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Again, this is my opinion.
I think you're absolutely right on that in terms of um, each generation has their own sets of challenges which they have to be able to overcome, and each set. But if you do have that principled approach, so they will be able to discern for themselves, who won't be able to decide for themselves what's the right thing to do now that I'm in this particular situation. Right? Your mum and dad can't do that for you because your mum and dad are in the exact same situation. So it's about then taking your own personal responsibility about how am I going to respond in this particular, with this particular scenario. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's totally correct. I think you had a very good point early on. And I do agree with you. The two things that kids need to have right at the beginning from the get-go, it's ethics, work ethic, like some, and obviously, and resilience. Because if you don't have your ethics, every single thing that happens or happens around you, you're most likely going to try to cheat or try to have a shortcut or try not to complete it because you think it's easier. And your resilience, just obviously to know that if something goes wrong, it has to go wrong, and then that's it. You can't really do much about it, but you have to move forward from that. If you have the two of them, and obviously both kind of rely heavily on love, because your kids need to have love. Only people who don't know love can really give love. So that kind of saying, it basically emphasizes in the fact that if you have that, you share that love with your kids, then obviously they will share with other people.
Lewis, I'm afraid our time is up. I think we were just, it's been absolutely fantastic talking with you today, Lewis. It's shown me a new insight. It's amazing when you work with someone and yet you don't have these conversations, how you don't really know who they are, if that makes sense. But this conversation has just shown you to me in a whole new light, right? I knew you were good before, but now, you're a star, trust me, right? It's been absolutely wonderful having you on. And I know that we're going to continue working together, but it'll be different, all right? So Lewis, thank you so much for everything that you've done, and continue to do that. Your children are very lucky. They've got a very wise father looking out for them. So Lewis, no, definitely, seriously.
Get that printed on a t-shirt. Yeah.
Definitely.
Wayne Mitchell said.
Even if they want to challenge you, right? There's definite wisdom in what you've got to offer them. They may not appreciate it yet, but in years to come, they will. Definitely.
Don't worry, I didn't either already at the beginning from my parents, so hopefully that time will come.
That's absolutely fantastic. I'm gonna just kind of like highlight what's coming up next. But that was just 1 second. So next week, let's just put it on. We're going to have Ibrahim. I'm wondering if you can see that. Yeah. Next week, we're going to have Ibrahim Zanta, who is a Pathways project manager. He works with illustrations and things like that. So I think he's going to be another very interesting individual to come and listen to and to share his experiences. If you haven't had the opportunity to see any of the Belonging series before, you can see it on our YouTube site, which is tinyurl.com/belonging-IAO. So please tune in, have a listen. Lewis's will be up there in the next few days. And we want to just say another big thank you to everyone for coming, and for Lewis for just being a brilliant guest this afternoon. So have a good weekend, and I will see you again next week. Take care.
Right. Thank you, Wayne. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Let me just...